Sounds exciting. A journey that I'm ready for. And so let's get started. So arm and harmony, right? Thanks, Jason, for that.
For that alliteration.
It's you, right? You came up with that HH.
It's a problem I have. I love alliteration. I love alliteration. I think it's memorable for the class. It's something you can kind of hold on to. Of course, this alliteration is contrasting, so harm and harmony. And I think a big part of this lesson is sort of laying an overview for the whole quarterly. We're looking at the extremes, essentially, that we see on human nature side. Human nature is a nature of harm. It really is, and we see that from the very beginning. One of the Q&As discusses Adam and Eve, and we look at the sin that was committed, that first sin that kind of defines all of us since Adam and Eve, and you see the harm has come from that. I mean, a breakdown in relationships on every level, not just the harm between ourselves and God, but the harm between each other in relationships, the harm, self-harm that we experience because of self-loathing, because of our sin, harm towards the environment, this war we have. So it really is a lesson that is focusing in on just the fundamental problem that we have, and then how it's contrasted with the beautiful harmony that is the Father and the Son, that is this loving and sacrificial nature. And I think this lesson really just sort of sums up everything that we're going to be looking at in greater detail in the following 12.
In the start of this lesson, I note the attention to unconditional love, Jody. So you did the introductions, right?
Right.
So explain that some more, and is that sort of the end goal of this entire?
So for this quarterly Faith and Foundations, like I said, that it's really bringing us through this journey to understand that goodness really comes from God. It's part of our culture to believe that goodness comes from us, and so we really want to tease that apart and to say, look, goodness really does come from God. So we need to kind of separate that. So one of the ways of doing that is to look at the limits of our love, to understand that our love is conditional, and if you think of this in terms of justice, we love those that love us, but we really, we'll be kind to those that are kind to us, but we're not really kind to those that aren't kind to us. We want to see harm come to those that harm us. That's human nature. That's justice. But if you live in a perfect world in the Garden of Eden, you really can't tell the difference between justice and goodness, because if everybody's kind to each other, then what do you do if somebody's unkind to you? That doesn't come into play. And so now that we live in a fallen world, in an unjust world, then goodness and justice start to separate. And so you start to see that, yeah, I can be kind to those that are kind to me, and I think, well, I'm a good person. But am I really kind to those that are unkind to me? That's what goodness means. The ability to continue to be kind even in the face of injustice, even in the face of unkindness. We can't do that. That's not part of our human nature. But God gives us His nature. He wants to give us His nature so that we can have the power to transcend our own human nature as He imparts His divine nature into us, and we can suffer injustice in order that others can see, I don't know what you have, right, but that's not human. I want that.
Right. And until we get to that point where we can be good to those who are not good to us, we can be kind to those that cause us harm, right? And I know we said we will get to that later, but I want a sneak peek. How can we ever get to that place where we don't cause any harm to others, especially those that harm us?
Right. Well, we think in terms of love, we usually think in terms of of love is the thou shalt nots. You know, the loving God as yourself, loving God with all your heart, loving your neighbors as yourself. We usually think in terms of all the thou shalt nots, and we think in love in terms of not committing sins. You know, not killing, not stealing, all those things. But you know, Jesus rephrased it as loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor. It's an active command. Right. Instead of the thou shalt nots, those are important as well, but it's a baseline. And in order to go from not causing harm to actually living a life of harmony, it's to have an active love, to say, what can I do to help others? Am I caring about the perils that others are facing, and do I want to help?
I think an important thing to recognize here, and I think everyone in the Sabbath school studying this lesson identifies with this, that the church itself is this wonderful test tube almost, if you will, where we experience this harm and harmony. We've been hurt by people at church. We have found wonderful communion and worship together at church. And to your question, you know, are we ever going to get there? Well, I think yes, when that time in the end comes, when God transforms us, the work will be finished. But it's a process that we're all on together. And I want to emphasize that these lessons are really meant to be done together. This is meant to be studied in community. Jody and I, in fact, are here in New Jersey this weekend filming, but we got to spend yesterday at one of the lovely churches in Brooklyn, United, and we had a wonderful time going through one of the lessons. And I didn't know any of these folks, but by the time I left that day, I was a brother, you know, to all of them. And that's the power of the church. And there's harm that happens in the church. We get our feelings hurt. Someone harms us in some way. But we also have this harmony because Jesus and His Spirit is present with us. And so really, I think we grow in this process best when we're growing together, when we're confronting these things together, when we're practicing almost, and imitating the best versions of each other as the Lord reveals Himself. And so I want to really encourage our classes to think about this as something that we do together. We're going to have time during the week where you study your lesson privately and you're thinking about it, and that's really important. But coming together on Sabbath morning or whenever you do your Sabbath schools and sitting down next to each other and listening. I've been pastoring for years and years, and I'm always amazed at what I learn at Sabbath school when people are given the freedom to speak in the Spirit as they have been taught. And I think it's so important when you get hurt at church, when you're harmed at church, the answer is not out the door to another church or starting your own church. The answer is the Holy Spirit that's in that church that tells us we know what to do with harm. We have the harmony of the cross that is meant to restore. And really, these next 12 lessons are unpacking this dynamic very carefully in all the different kinds of ways it can manifest itself.
So you say the next 12 lessons will deal with this. So this first lesson is almost like a map.
Yeah, it's like an overview.
Map and journey. I'm going to take the liberty to say then that we're on a journey through these lessons, and that this first one was just a map to see where we're going and how we're going to get there, sort of. And so the next set, though, we will deal with, it will deal with our side of it, the flesh beliefs and the nature that we have. So those are things, ditches we want to, or exits we don't want to take. Like, no, keep driving, that's not our exit, just keep going, right? So we'll go to that point.